Welcome everyone to Ask the Expert with the Winter Cluster. My name is Sara Dzimianski. I'm an Extension Educator for Ag and Natural Resources here in Perry County, Indiana, and I am also a beekeeper myself. Today I'd like to welcome our guests panelists. We have Armonda Riggs. Armonda is a small farmer in eastern Greene County. She's been farming for almost 4 years and began farming because it allowed her to create a lifestyle that produced good things and become stewards of the land that they live on. I'd also like to welcome Bill. Bill grew up on a farm in Sullivan County, Indiana. After moving to Ohio and Kentucky during his career as a machinist, he returned to his hometown in 2002. In returning to his roots, Spurlin Homestead Farm was born. In addition to having a large garden, fruit trees, grapevines, and blackberry vines, meat rabbits, chickens, sheep, a variety of herbs, and bees are raised on the farm. Bill and his wife are vendors at their local farmers market. They serve on the board of directors for the market. Bill is an advanced Indiana master naturalist and is the program coordinator for the Sullivan County IMN. Bill serves on the Jumpstart Committee for the Beekeepers of Indiana. Bill is an avid survivalist and teaches survival skills classes. He works for the Indiana DNR as maintenance foreman at the Green Sullivan State Forest. Bill can be reached through his Homestead Farm Facebook page or by email at bspurlin@juno.com. And I will go ahead and let our other speaker, Matt Evans, introduce himself. Matt, if you'll go ahead.
Hello, my name is Matt Evans. I'm a commercial beekeeper in northeastern Indiana. I work for Clover Blossom Honey. We take care of about 3,000 hives. That's all we do is bees produce honey in the summertime in Indiana and pollinate almonds in California in the winter. I've been in beekeeping for about 10 years now and commercially for about 4.
Thank you, Matt. So what we're going to do today is we have some questions that we're going to get started with. And while our panelists are asking these first several questions, we'd appreciate it if you would ask your questions in the Q&A. And we'll get to your questions as we go. So we'll go ahead and start with the questions. I would like each of you to tell us what sparked your interest in beekeeping and how long you've been keeping bees. So Matt, you're unmuted, so why don't you start?
I was first around bees in Oregon in the 90s. A friend of mine was an entomologist student at the Oregon State University, and I did a lot of carpentry work, and she asked me to just build a few different parts for her, and I kind of took an interest at that point. It wasn't until I moved back to Indiana in 2000 that it's about 2000 and maybe 4 or 5 when I caught a swarm, and it just kind of went from there for me.
Armonda, how about you?
Yeah, because I am a small farmer, bees are, for me, a primary helper, a coworker, if anything, on my farm. So for me, I know I have to have them. And so that's why I wanted to get into beekeeping and have continued in beekeeping, because I know how important they are for not just my farm, but for our entire world.
Thank you, Armonda. And Bill, how about you?
Yeah, mine is about basically the same. I grew up with bees. My father had bees before I was smaller. And then when we moved back, got the garden and the blackberries and all the herbs and that kind of stuff, we need bees to keep everything pollinated. So we got into it as a pollination group and trying to help out everybody around us for its pollination.
Great. Now, if each of you would share how you sourced your first bees and how you got started. So we'll go in the same order. So Matt, if you could start us, please.
I caught a swarm, like I said, at my first hive, and I think I maybe bought a couple packages the year after that. And then I purchased some brood the year after that to make my own nukes and raised queen cells for those. And from there on, I've just expanded from within. I personally have about 300 colonies myself that I take care of after working on the weekends, to go along with the ones that we have at the business. And we raise all of our own cells and split all of our bees off of our own bees. We don't buy any packages or any nukes or any queens from anywhere else. We raise everything right here, and we're based out of LaFountain, Indiana, which is near Wabash.
Thank you, Matt. Armonda, how did you get started?
Yeah. So as I joined my local beekeeping club before I even got my first colony. I knew that I wanted to be as prepared as possible to take on livestock. I mean, bees are livestock. So I joined the club, met some wonderful local beekeepers. And then from there, I found out that one actually was into breeding stock. So I sourced 3 nukes from a local beekeeper, and that was my start. The next year, I was actually gifted a swarm from another local beekeeper because he ran out of hive bodies to put them in. So yeah, that's how I got my first colonies. And then from there, my goal is to just grow my own, just to continue doing splits and, possibly look into queen rearing and doing all of that myself as well.
And Bill, if you could answer, please.
Yeah, our first
Regular chocolate.
hive we got from Kelly's Bees down in Kentucky. We bought a package, and then we caught a few swarms. And then we've been to a point now where all we do now either splits or doing kitchen swarms. We caught 15 swarms last year and split our hives up. So we're in the neighborhood of 20 plus hives right now. So.
Thank you. So next question is, do you keep your bees full time, and how did you obtain financing to get started? Matt, if you could start us, please. Matt, you're muted.
Am I now?
There you go.
There we go. I'm sorry. Repeat it again. How did we get?
Yeah. Do you keep bees full time, and how did you finance your bees when you got started?
Yes, full-time beekeeper. That's all we do, and no, didn't do any financing. I've just paid for it as I've gone along. I was just always told from the beginning, you don't want to borrow money to start beekeeping. It's not a good business model, I don't think. But maybe it is for some people. But our philosophy is once you have honey on the hives, then you've got some money in the bank, and you can maybe go out and spend a little bit. But until then, you probably ought to hold on to what you have. Just rebuild old equipment, whatever you can do.
Armonda?
I as well have personally financed all of my bee purchases. Actually, Bill and I went in on our last equipment order together so that we could kind of get a little discounted price. So maybe if you're having issues with pricing, you could, reach out to local beekeepers and do that as well. But yeah, I'm on the same lines with Matt on not wanting to have to go into any loans or debt if I don't have to with these purchases.
And do you keep bees full time, or are you a part-time beekeeper?
Sorry about that. I do not keep them full time. They are part of my farm. So they're, you know, integral as far as the things that I'm constantly doing around here. But, you know, I don't have enough hives for it to be full time for me.
And Bill, if you could answer, please.
Yeah, I'm basically a self-finance. I never borrowed any money to start the bees that we got. Basically, like Armonda said, we kind of work with the bee club, trying to get better prices. I build my own boxes, so I don't like trying to borrow money to make money. But for as full time, they're just part of my livestock, and I do have a full-time job with the DNR. But I put in several hours a week or a month just taking care of the bees.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, let's start with Matt again. What is the thing you wish you knew before you started beekeeping?
What are some things I wished I did? To get prepared for beekeeping, you mean?
One thing that now that you know, what do you wish you knew before you got started?
Well, I wished I wouldn't have thought that I could like magically figure out varroa mites on my own and that the bees are just going to take care of themselves, because I'm completely against that philosophy. I've seen plenty of people go down that road and it never works out. I don't know why some people think that. I think sometimes people just have this mentality, well, I can do it better than what everybody else. I don't know. It's just, but if I would have known then that I wasn't going to be able to defeat the varroa mites by just letting the bees try to do it on their own, that would have saved me a few years of learning for sure. Once you, in my opinion, once you have a healthy colony of bees with, and you have your varroa mites under control at the best you can, most times of the year, when it's the hardest in the middle of summer when the hive is at its most populous, of course. But it's just amazing what a good, healthy, strong beehive looks like and does over the course of a year when it doesn't have a varroa mite load or a bad virus load. So that would be the one thing that I wish I, would have got me a little bit further along, a little bit quicker, I think.
Armonda.
Sorry about that. Yeah, as far as things I would have liked to have known, I don't know. I don't think there's many things I would like to have known before I got into it. Because like I said, I tried to do a lot of being prepared for it. But things that I know now is that it is constantly learning. So you always have to be learning and keep up to date with what is happening, because our environment's changing, and so are our bees. So it's important for me to continue educating myself on the best way to be a beekeeper. Yeah.
And Bill.
Well, I guess the best thing I would say is I would join the bee club sooner. When we first got our bees, was not a part of a bee club. And I thought because my dad had them when I was younger, that bees was no big deal. You just throw them out there and forget about them. And what I didn't realize everything that's changed since then. So we went to a few schools, some first year bee class and that kind of stuff. But I learned more at my local bee club than I ever did the classes. So I would say I would join, maybe like Armonda did, where you would join the club before you actually get the bees.
Thank you. So we're going to move from some of our questions that we had on our list to some of our listener questions. So our first question, why do most beekeepers suggest you buy 2 clusters to a beginning beekeeper or somebody who's just getting started?
I can answer that. I
was
suggest
gonna
that
say,
you buy
open
2,
anybody?
basically because you can compare them that way. Every beehive is going to be you need something to compare it to. If you have nothing to compare it to, then you have nothing, know whether something's going bad or not.
So Armonda, you were going to answer?
Yeah, I would just to contribute to that as well. I mean, again, for me, they're livestock, it's breeding stock. So then if something does happen with one hive, I can always supplement the other hive, you know, whether it's moving frames or moving honey, or even combining them. So if you do find out that one is failing, then you can look at combining the two depending upon where you're at in the season. So yeah, I definitely agree. I bought 3 when I first bought mine. So there's that.
Matt, do you have anything to add?
I would just agree. It's just always, you know, one beehive will oftentimes look a lot different than the other. So especially when you're learning, it's good to see the differences in different hives, and a lot of that has to do with the quality of the queen, honestly. And to also to be able to share resources if you need to. That's a good thing to do as a new beekeeper early on in the season, but as the season gets later, say August, I tend to not rob from Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. Throw good at bad, whatever you want to say. If you do have a weaker hive, the later in the year, it's always better to take something from a strong hive to try to help a weaker hive, but earlier in the season, and especially learning, that's why I would want to have 2. And then just better chance to take a hive through your first winter, because it's pretty disappointing to invest this much time and money that it is to get started, and just with one hive and then it die, and then you got to wait till spring to for it to, you know, but it happens to everybody still. Even with 2 hives, you can lose them both, but just the chances of getting one to winter, I think, is greater, and then getting your first hive through winter is also a great accomplishment. So that's what I would have to add to that.
So Matt, we'll just keep you there. I am just starting this next spring. Is the best way to get started by purchasing the hives, painting them, and then getting the bees in the spring? So Matt, if we could start off with you, and then we'll go back in the order we were going before. So they're asking if they should be purchasing the hives now and painting them, and then getting bees in the spring. Matt, you're muted.
Can someone else start first? My phone's dying and I'm switching phones right now. So I may have 2 pictures up. I don't even know, but I have the Zoom call up on the other phone. I'm just going to hang this one up.
Okay, Armonda, let's go with you.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and one that I think this individual's on the right track. Yeah, you're most likely not going to be able to access a hive colony at this time of year to be able to start with. The bees are, you know, decreasing their colony size right now, so there's not a lot of beekeepers out there that are, you know, looking to do nukes or splits. But I mean, you can always look at possibly buying a full colony. I actually did that. That's how I initially got started, and then they all died. So I went into spring and I got the nukes. So yeah, I would say that's probably your best bet, just to ride out the winter, you know, make some good connections, find a local beekeeper that you can possibly source a nuke from, or you know, a package of bees and a queen or something like that, that you can build your apiary from that. But yeah, good approach.
Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, if you're thinking about getting into it in the spring, and like Armonda said, you're not going to get any bees this time of year, but you need to get all your equipment ready. If you're going to paint your boxes and get all that stuff done, you need to get them painted and then let them air out, because you don't want that paint fumes and everything fresh when you put your bees into it. So yeah, get prepared what you can. Like Steve said, join a bee club and go from there, but work all winter up to the point where you're ready to get your bees.
Thank you. You know, we're waiting on Matt to come back, but we'll go ahead and answer some more questions.
Can't see me?
Oh, there you are. There you are, Matt. Okay.
I would say joining the bee school. I'm signing up for the bee school. That I don't know if that was already gone, but that happens at I believe it's the last weekend of February. But at the Beekeepers of Indiana website is where you can sign up for that. And it is at Decatur Central High School, south side of Indianapolis. I think it's Decatur Central, but anyway, it's the south side of Indianapolis, and there's about 1,000 people every year at that. And then there's an all-day bee school part of that, and there's also there'll be some speakers and breakout sessions. You have to do one or the other. You either do the bee school all day, or you can just wander around and listen to different speakers. And there's also vendors there at the bee school, several different, from Kelly's, Day Dance, Man Lake, Baston's local. So I'd recommend that to anybody who's going to get into it, or even anybody that's already had bees this year. If you haven't taken the bee school, it's a good event, and there's not a lot else going on beekeeping wise that time of the year. So it does sell out almost every year. That's a really good thing. As far as purchasing bees, I would recommend a Nuke, local Nuke. There's a lot of people that are selling Nukes, and I see new names pop up every year in Indiana that I don't recognize. When you spend that much money on a Nuke, I would work through a local bee club, like it's already been spoken, to kind of check some of these people out before you just offer them up $175 or $200. Ask if anybody else has bought a Nuke from them. I always recommend Ron Baston and his son Joe Baston Honeybee Farm. They sell a lot of Nukes. They've been around for a while. They pretty well stand behind their product. So as far as like, if you don't have any idea or have any sources to find out from somebody who they might recommend, I think they're always a good option. I don't recommend packages to anyone. Packages cost around $125 to $130, and what you get is bees and an unknown queen. With a Nuke, you can find plenty of Nukes in Indiana for around $175, and with that, you're going to get 5 frames, hopefully 3 of which have brood on them, which would be some forms of unborn bees, of eggs, larvae, and sealed brood, and then a frame of food with some hot honey and pollen, and possibly the 5th frame will be foundation or partially drawn out. But you're going to start out with a lot more to work with from the very beginning. And the problem with that is you have to convince people that have all this equipment sitting around since Christmas or whatever empty, asking them to wait another month, because you're going to have to wait another month usually for a good Nuke over a package. But I think in 95% of the cases, the Nuke's going to catch right up to the package. That's just my opinion of what I've seen, and I just really think Nukes are the way to go.
Okay.
Can I
next.
interject something here?
Sure. Go ahead.
The bee school, and he was right for the past years on the bee school. This year, because of COVID, it's going to be at the Hilton in Muncie, Indiana. They are limited to 400 people total. Of the 400, 100 is been reserved for new beekeepers. So normally it's like 1,000 people, 800 people come. So if you want to go to the school, then you need to get registered right away. What they're doing, instead of having where you go from classroom to classroom all day long, you'll be in the same classroom and the instructor is going from classroom to classroom. So because of COVID, it's completely changed, and it's limited to 400 people.
Thank you. So our next question, we'll start with Matt. Do any of you keep Russian bees, and any tips for keeping bees?
No Russians here. From what I understand with Russians, you have to be in an area where there would be no other beekeepers present to, because after one virgin, once they swarm and raise a new queen, most of that trait's going to be lost, from what I understand, to keep pure Russians. So even purchasing what might be considered pure Russians, or said to be pure Russians, I would be skeptical myself. I don't know anything else about them other than that.
Bill or Armando, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, my bees are mutts. I mean, people ask me if I have a specific type breed, however you want to say that. And I mean, they're my livestock. I keep them alive. But as far as you know, their specific genetics, I don't know. I can't GPS track them like Matt was saying to wherever they go and what they do with their reproductive. So yeah, sorry, I can't contribute anything else but that.
Yeah, I started out with Russians and switched to Italians, and now I have mutts. So they're a little bit of everything right now.
Thank you. Okay, we'll start with Matt with the next question. Are you using any kind of long hives? Would it be difficult to transition from traditional Langstroth to hives to a long lang? Would this be a good option in our area?
I think you could there wouldn't be any problem doing it if you're going to be using the same frames, which is different than a top bar hive. With long lang is going to use the same frames as your 10 frame or 8 frame Langstroth hives. Typically they're always deep, so I don't think you would have a medium size frame. As far as our area, bees move up and down, no problem, all times of the year in a hive through as a cluster. They cannot move horizontally though without warm enough temperatures, and so that would be the downfall, I think, to a horizontal hive. You could have honey a couple inches away from the cluster, and if you don't have 25 or 30 degree day for a week or two, and the bees have move all the way to the top through their honey and eat it all and end up at the lid and can't move over to where the honey's at, they starve. And we even in a good Langstroth hive with 2 deeps or 2 deeps and a medium honey super, sometimes bees will starve right next to honey, and it's just because they can't move sideways as a cluster. They have to break the cluster, move, and reorient. So, and I just think it's a little bit better to have your honey stored in a vertical situation more than a horizontal situation myself.
Armando, do you have anything to add?
I've never worked with that type of hive. I guess the only thing that as far as hive bodies and boxes are considered for me personally, being a small statured individual, I have determined that I am moving forward with medium frame boxes for my entire hive colonies because I can physically manage them a lot better than with deeps. So I don't know if anybody else is considering that, but that is my plan of colony management, is to have medium-sized boxes for easier maneuverability.
And Bill, do you have anything to add?
No, I've always used Langsford, so that's why I've had the best results in.
Thank you. Okay, and Matt, let's start with you again. How many hives does it take to be a full-time beekeeper?
That's a tough question. It just depends on how you want to go about it. Some people, if they want to really push hard to retail honey and get the most they can for their honey, you might be able to do pretty good with 100 hives. But you're going to spend a lot of your time marketing and retailing and not that much time beekeeping. From a pollination, honey production standpoint, and I mean, we produce a few hundred barrels of honey a year, and we pretty much wholesale all of that. We have a small retail table in our shop that's an honor system. We don't retail at any other locations, so we're selling our honey for under $3 a pound, but in bulk sizes. So in that case, to support one person or maybe one family, but say one person working the bees, you're probably going to need 400 or 500 hives to make something like that work. And then that would be more full-time beekeeper and not 3/4 time honey seller, 1/4 time beekeeper, if that makes sense. But I'd say about 500 hives per individual if you're going to try to do it commercially and mainly just beekeep.
Thank you, Matt. Bill or Armonda, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just along the same lines as what Matt said, it really depends on what type of venture you're wanting to go in with full-time beekeeping. There's a lot of information as far as resources for you to just, I mean, you can literally Google like how much, you know, a pound of honey averages and, you know, determine from those prices what it would take. But there are a lot of ways, you know, Matt mentioned pollination services. But you know, wax is huge. Like I had a friend the other day was like, you should start making beeswax crayons. And I'm like, we'll see. But you know, there's a lot of ways that, you know, you can make money off of beekeeping.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
Just basically repeat what Armonda said. I took honey off 6 hives. I got a little over 250 pounds of honey this year, $10 a pound at the local farmers market. So, you know, that you can calculate that up. You can do lip balms, you can do lotions and that kind of stuff off your wax if you want to. So there is a way of doing it if you want to really work hard at it. But I would suggest you have to be in at least the 20 plus range to be able to even scrape by.
Thank you. So next question, we'll go back to Matt. What do you use for Varroa? Is resistance to treatments a problem for you?
We use Apivar, which is an amitraz-based product, and we also use formic acid. We like formic acid because it when we pull the honey is when we actually do that, which you can do formic acid with the honey superglue as well. But we like to do it at the time of pulling honey. This formic acid, I don't know if it 100% does, but pretty much kills any open brood in the hive when you put it on the hive. So, and it seems to kind of shut the queen down. And we're no experts up here, but what we see and what we think we see with our eyes is, you know, at that time of the end of honey production, which we pull all of our honey at one time. We start at the end of July, 1st of August, and then we pull honey until October 1st. If we can, we try to get done before the 1st of October. And what we see in the hives at that point is we see the queens starting to break down from virus, especially older queens, 2-year-old queens, year and a half old, 1.5-year-old queens, where the virus load is starting to affect her brood, and we feel like she's laying infected eggs with our, then we just start to see the brood break down, and we like to kind of clear that brood out. That's going to kind of give us time for, you know, when you get rid of all that open brood in a hive, the sealed brood is still going to be fine and hatch. And then after 10 days, get that out and put a couple Apivar strips in. You pretty much don't have any sealed brood at that point because the formic killed all the open brood. It also kind of, we think, shuts the queen down because you won't, if it doesn't, it shoves her all the way to the bottom of the hive. Typically we treat on top, and she might start to lay brood again down there. But just from our experience of going back and looking after a formic treatment, there's a considerable bit less brood in the hive. And so we really just want to shut the queen down at that point for a little bit. Hopefully that allows her to maybe get a little healthier, start to lay some healthier brood. And then we give them the Apivar treatment. And Apivar seems to still be pretty effective. It's still our best bet that we're using, and we're monitoring all the time for a couple of ways we do that. We do some alcohol washes, but don't really like, especially this time of year, not too keen on killing 200 bees in the hive. They're not, if you look in a hive now, there's not hardly any brood in the hive, if any at all. So you're not going to replace those bees anytime soon. But what we do like to do is with the hard chemical treatment like the Apivar, we put a sticky board in the hive at the same time as the treatment, and we go back 24 to 48 hours later and take that out and just see how many mites. And if there's, and you're going to have a lot of mites because you're using a chemical treatment, but we kind of just evaluate, and then we'll go back in a couple more weeks. We might give them a brand new strip, even though those strips are good for 6 weeks, and throw another sticky board in and just see what kind of drop we're getting then, so we can see that our drop is getting less. I would certainly recommend that with anyone using oxalic acid. We have experimented with oxalic acid, vaporizing, dribbling. Dribbling is something you can do this time of the year on a warm enough day. But if you wait to dribble a hive until now for a treatment, you've really set that hive back behind the 8 ball a lot from getting to this point with a varroa load that it has if you haven't done any other varroa treatment after the honey was pulled. But in our experiences with vaporizing oxalic acid, we've tried to do it many different ways, every 5 days, every 7 days, 3 or 4 times in a month like that. We go back and we throw a Apivar strip in and a sticky board, and we just drop a ton of mites. So our beekeeping is a little different though. We do have 24 to 30 hives in every location, so we've got a lot more hives around each other. And if for someone with just a couple of hives, or 5 or 6 hives in one location, and if they're neighbors, they don't have neighbors close by with bees, they can probably get away with a little bit lesser treatments. But we're pretty much constantly keeping treatments on our bees if they don't have honey supers on, or we're monitoring them with some kind of treatment to see where the mites are, because the mites just really can get out of control on you. And then we keep 1,000 hives in Indiana. That's what we're doing today. We're going around to our stationary bee yards and checking them for feed, pulling the treatment that we put in after we pulled the honey. And then in late January, early February, when we visit them, we will put a single Apivar strip right into every cluster. We think it's one of our most effective treatments of the season. The bees are pretty broodless. They're clustered in that strip, and we can really we can get a really good knockdown then going into spring. And that's when you need it the most, because a few mites going into spring turn into many, many, many mites. So at the lowest number you can go into spring when you start honey supering, that's your best chance for a honey crop and for a successful winter as well, I think.
Thank you, Matt. Armonda, what do you treat with?
Yes, so I think if anything, just reiterating that you need to have some sort of treatment plan, regardless of how you decide to treat. Obviously, there's still a lot of research happening in regards to what might be the best or most effective, and that's the benefit of having other local beekeepers for resources, right? So for me, what I have done is try to use as little chemicals as possible, because I am operating my farm here, and I'm registered through Driftwatch, and so I don't want to be out there putting anything that I don't need to with my bees. So I use rhubarb leaves, which have low oxalic acid, and I do that at least 2, but I try to do 3 times. Just depends on how my rhubarb is producing, but if needed, I'm sure I can find another friend who has some I can use. But I just put those on the top of my hive, and the bees don't like them there, so they chew those up and they drag it through the hive. And for me, it seems to be working to keep the mite load down. In addition to that, I have borrowed my fellow beekeeper friend Bill Spurlin's Mighty Mite Killer, and have used that once each year that I've been beekeeping on my hive. And as far as checking my loads, I do sugar rolls to determine if I need more treatment or if they're doing fine, and adjust my pest management plan according to that.
Thank you, Armonda. And Bill, could you share how you treat?
Yeah, I am like Armando. We try to be chemical free if possible, because the other things we do around here. So I purchased a unit called a Mighty Mite Killer. It is a heat treatment for the bees. Now I understand, like in Matt's case, where you're a commercial beekeeper with several hundred hives, it would not be efficient for you. But what this does is it's a tray you slide inside the entrance of the hive, and you heat the hive up to 106 degrees, and you hold it for 3 hours. That does not hurt the bees, nor hurts the queen, but it will kill all the mites that's on the bees and what's inside the brood cell. And then you pull that out. You do that a couple times a year, and that will eliminate your mite load. Knock on wood, I haven't lost a hive in the last 3 years, but I'm still using that to mites. When in between heat treats, I do the same with Armonda. I put rhubarb leaves on, and I also will fog my hives with mineral spirit and like a wintergreen type of essential oil to take care of our hives.
Mineral oil, not mineral spirits. Right?
Yes, mineral oil. I'm sorry. Yeah, mineral oil.
Thank you. Next question, let's go to Matt. I have 2 colonies that are too deep, and in the bottom box, there are a few non-drawn out frames. Should I just downsize to a single deep to make it full? Should I consolidate the 2 so that the brood and honey are equal between the 2? If I don't consolidate, what should I do with the couple extra frames with capped honey?
I would make sure I had a good mouse guard on the hive. Move the undrawn frames to the outside of the bottom box, so both sides, not just one side. Put what drawn frames you do have in the middle of that box, and I try to have all drawn frames in the top box of the 2 deeps, and this should be fine. But it's going to be critical to have a good mouse guard on there, and then I wouldn't worry about the bees having too much room. They should be fine, and then that's just going to be easier for you to take care of what comb you do have outside in the winter than having to try to deal with it inside. You end up with mice problems and other problems, just the same, trying to bring things inside. So the bees can take care of it the best if they're alive and healthy.
Okay, Armonda, do you have an answer for that?
I'm just nodding away with what Matt had responded there. I think that's the best approach. The only thing I would say is be cautious of how much honey you actually have in there, and be prepared to intervene if they don't have enough honey to be able to make it through winter. That would be my only addition.
And Bill, do you have anything to add?
Yep, they covered it all.
Perfect. Okay, I'd like to follow up on a previous question with Armonda. You mentioned using the rhubarb leaves. Have you had a higher mite drop after using the combination of the rhubarb / Mighty Mite Killer, or higher honey? Have you used anything to kind of measure your mite drop?
I mean, I track them. I have like a rubric, like a journal that I track all of my information in, but not really, to be honest with you. I haven't noticed any correlation between only doing one versus, having done one and the other kind of, offset or any of that experimentation yet. Could be fun to look at, but no, I haven't as of now. I just know that the mites are being managed well, using, again, the pest management protocols that I have set up. So until I have anything different happen, I'm just gonna keep implementing what I've done here.
Thank you. Bill, do you have anything to add?
Well, basically, it's hard to track how many mite kills you get off a rhubarb leaf. I know in my case, I try to leave a rhubarb leaf on the hive all the time. So every time I go in, if it's short of one, I go ahead and put another one on. So it's like a continuous treatment with a natural acetic acid on it.
Thank you. Okay, let's go back to Matt. Can I reuse frames with comb that is 2 or more, with comb on it that is 2 or more years old?
I don't have any problem with it. We have 40-year-old combs in our hives, black as they can be, and we tend to rotate those to the bottom box. But as long as you don't have any foul brood issues, meaning American foul brood, they're fine to reuse. I know that there were some. I would not recommend to any new beekeepers that they buy any old combs without knowing what American foul brood smells like. And some did show up in Indiana this year, I know of, and we found it. And Kathleen Prue actually has one of the frames sealed and secured that she's gonna. So if anyone is listening and can contact Kathleen, she has a frame to let people smell, to know that smell. And it's once you smell that one time, you will never, you'll always remember that smell. And if you do come across anything like that, the equipment has to be burned. Like I said, this has been protected from infecting anything else. That's why Kathleen still has it, just for teaching purposes. But as far as the European foul brood, the other foul brood we see, which sometimes people call Snotty Brood, something that crops up a lot in the spring. You'll get yellowish colored brood. You'll also see it in the fall sometimes when a hive's breaking down from virus. Sometimes this yellow snotty brood, some people call it idiopathic brood. It usually will test out as European foul brood. There's no for sure that it is even that, I don't think, but that is something that's typically not a problem that stays infected. We reuse those combs all the time. But if the comb's in good shape, has been drawn out nicely on both sides, and consists of mainly worker brood comb, we'll never throw that out. We will get rid of some old drone comb occasionally, or broken frames that we can't repair. Even if wax moths, if hive beetle larvae infest frames and slime it and get it just as gross as it can ever look, all you have to do is expose those to sunlight. If we come across the hive, and that's rare, but if we come across the hive, and typically it'd be in one of our stationary yards that we aren't at as often, that does get some slime hive beetle problems, all you do is split the boxes, stand them up on their ends, so that sunlight can travel through. All the larvae will be dead, and put those on top of a good hive or above an inner cover on a good hive, and they'll be cleaned right up and ready to go again. So I think maybe it's a good idea to get rid of frames every 4 or 5 years. I know that's recommended by some people. It's certainly not anything we do. And I've bought probably 4,000 or 5,000 frames out of California, deep drawn frames over the last few years, and haven't had a single problem.
Thank you, Matt. Armonda or Bill, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, yes, reuse the frames if they're in good working order. Actually, a lot of beekeepers like to use those older frames to even catch swarms. So having those are useful in many different ways.
And Bill?
Yeah, just don't throw away anything that's good.
So next question, and our time is starting to get short, so I'm going to throw questions out, and if somebody has, so we won't necessarily go through all of you, but any opinions on the flow hive system? I have one that has yet to be used. So anybody want to answer that? Armonda, do you want to answer? Or Bill?
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Any opinions on the flow hive system?
We have a member in our bee club that has a flow hive, and to him it is fun. It's good for his grandkids to watch and that kind of stuff. But he basically told me, he says he has one, and when it's gone, it's gone.
Any other comments? If not, we'll move on to the next question. When you are making splits to sell as nukes, do you always sell last year's queens to keep young queens in your yard, or do you keep good queens? So, Matt?
I think a nuke ought to come with a brand new queen personally. Some people advertise overwintered nukes. That means the queen was last year's queen. And probably, I mean, maybe it was a late mated queen that stayed in a nuke its whole life. I don't see the benefit of purchasing with an overwintered queen or overwintered nuke. I would want a nuke that is about a month old from when it was made to 5 weeks, that got a good queen mated from a queen cell. There's a young queen that's laying well. That's gonna you'll get a chance to produce honey with that nuke on good years, but you're gonna have a much better queen going into the second year when you will produce honey. And that's my opinion. Queen longevity is a problem, and 1-year-old queens are certainly healthy 1-year-old queens that are mated well are the most productive for sure. Once they get 2 years old and older, you do find a few good ones, but it's once they make a couple honey cycles, the queens are pretty much done nowadays, it seems like, in my experience.
Anybody else to say on that?
Yeah, basically, I would say I wouldn't buy a new car with a known motor, and your queen is the motor. So, you know, if you get a new car, get a new motor.
Armand, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's all about learning the verbiage and what is really being communicated in the purchases that you're making. So just be as informed as possible when you go out and start purchasing anything related to beekeeping.
Thank
And
you.
I also asked a question, are you just buying a commercial queen from California or Georgia and then pulling brood out of your hive and throwing a unknown mated queen in there, or are you raising the queens from local stocks? Because that would be easy for me to do. All the brood that we have coming back from California, just buy a bunch of $25 queens, and I do offer that choice to people. If they want to buy 50 nukes from me, I'll go out and find and source 50 commercial queens, and there'll be a little bit of a cost to them if they want them quicker. But I feel like that you're better off with an Indiana raised queen, and that nuke's not going to be ready until Memorial Day at the very earliest, north of I-70, I'll say, in Indiana. As far as mating weather and all that, you might get some mated queens in late April, early May, but typically those aren't going to be your best queens. The ones that are mated late May, early June seem to be the queens that are the best performers that we see. So it takes a little bit of patience to get a good Indiana queen in your nuke, but I think that's key.
Thank you, Matt. So we have 2 more questions in our Q&A. So is there any reason not to keep robbing screens on all year?
I run solid bottoms year round.
Any other comments on this?
I think the question, can you hear me?
Yes.
The video stopped. But anyway, I think the question was about robbing screens, not
Right. Yeah,
bottoms.
not the screen bottoms. Yeah.
If you don't want to reduce the entrance at an inappropriate time of the year. I wouldn't want to have. We don't put anything on to stop robbing, except our nukes have smaller entrances. If a hive's getting robbed, it's usually got a problem in our experience. But I certainly wouldn't want them on in the heat of summer, screen bottom board or not. If you got a healthy, strong hive, you need, bees are coming and going, restricting the entrance and creating a situation for them to have to ventilate differently than what they might normally isn't necessarily healthy, I don't think, for the hive. But later in the fall, once you start pulling honey, and you have stronger and weaker hives, yeah, you'd probably be a good idea to restrict the entrance on some weaker ones. But the biggest thing I'd be looking at is just, you know, a mouse guard at that point in time, making sure you have a good mouse guard first and foremost.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing that Matt had said there. I mean, it's really about your hive health and its strength. So if you know you're working with good hives, then you really shouldn't have to worry about having any type of robbing screen. But, you know, again, if you do come into that situation, be prepared, I guess, that may be happening. So try to adjust and do whatever's necessary to, you know, protect your colony.
Thank you. So one last question. Since all the bees move to the top of the winter, in the spring, do you flip the top and bottom deep boxes?
We don't ever reverse any boxes. Usually if the bees are all the way up in the top like that, right at all at the inner cover, they probably need some food. And that's another quick thing I'll say, that a lot of people don't know that you can feed hives liquid feed during the winter. Pro Sweet is what it's called. It's a blend of sucrose and fructose, and it won't freeze to like 30 below zero. And Man Lake makes it. So I would look in the spring at, even if it's still really cold out, getting some Pro Sweet and putting on the hive when they're like that. And they'll push down. They'll always push down. We don't reverse boxes. And like I said earlier, a lot of our older combs are in the bottom box. So that's what we do. And we always top super when we honey super as well. We don't take a honey super off and put a super under it.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, I think it just depends on how you want to manage your hives. I mean, I know there's some people who they do switch their top and bottom boxes, but you know, they're probably not managing, you know, hundreds of hives and doing that either. So I think you have to figure out what is going to be in the best interest of your apiary management, and you know, just be as informed and educated as possible on how you want to manage your colonies.
Bill, do you have anything?
I personally don't switch my hive body boxes either. I'm actually looking at possibly going down to just one hive body colonies for wintering even. Not this year, maybe next year.
Bill, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't flip boxes. I just do. Half of my hives right now are a single deep for the winter. I'm going also to the single deep for a brood box with honey supers on top of that. So no, I do not flip boxes.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and you know, many thanks to our panelists. Please remember that we are going to be talking about mite treatments next week, so be sure to come back next week, and remember to provide feedback. I posted the link, and I'll post it one more time. You can go to this link and give us some feedback on our session today. We'd appreciate it. And there was one last question that somebody asked, and I'll just let you guys go out on this question. And it's, do any of you sell nukes in the spring?
Well, Bill and I are looking at possibly selling nukes in the spring, so not yet, but there's a possibility.
Yeah, we've already sold 3, so.
Yeah, I do sell nukes. Like I said, they're with Indiana raised queens, and they so what I sell in 25 at a time. So I like to get a few people to get together and do that. I don't really do individual nukes. And we at Clover Blossom Honey also sell some nukes where I work. So I usually post a post on Central Indiana Beekeeping page or something like that whenever when I know the health of the hives and condition of the hives, and that usually isn't until January.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for attending. And so just make sure that you fill out our survey, giving us feedback on this session, and make sure to come back next week for our session on mite treatments. Have a great day.